You may be seated. Okay, let the record reflect that the defendant is present, along with counsel for the defendant, assistant state attorney. Both sides ready to proceed?
Yes.
I think we left off with Mrs. Vickers examining a DVD that was played. Ms. Vickers, have you had a chance to examine it?
I have.
Okay. Do you want to play another portion?
No, I do not.
Okay. Thank you. State, do you have any more witnesses?
No, Your Honor, the state will be announcing arrest at this time.
Is there any motions by the defense at this time?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Does the defense, who's going to be your first witness?
Dr. Randy Otto.
Okay. Let's return the jury. I will let the state rest in front of the jury and then you may be seated. Does the state recognize the presence of the jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
And does the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Members of the jury, did you follow all of my previous instructions? Okay, the state may call this next witness.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would rest.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the state has now arrested this case. Ms. Vickers, Ms. Clausen, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may call your first witness.
Thank you. Dr. Randy Otto.
Dr. Randy Otto.
Please raise your right hand and face the front.
You solemnly swear the testimony you should give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Could you please state your name?
Randy Kurt Otto, O-T-T-O.
Thank you. And where do you currently live?
I live in outside Tampa, Florida.
What is your occupation?
I have a couple. My primary, I spend most of my time at the University of South Florida. I'm a faculty member there. I've been there for about 24 years. Independent from the university, separate from the university, I also have a practice that's essentially limited to evaluating people whose mental states are an issue in some kind of litigation or legal proceeding.
Okay. And at the university, what do you teach?
I'm a professor. My primary appointment is in a department called Mental Health Law and Policy. It's an interdisciplinary department where we address interactions between the legal and the mental health systems. I'm an adjunct professor in the Department of Psychology. I'm a psychologist by training. I'm an adjunct professor in the Department of Criminology. And I also hold an adjunct appointment across the bay at Stetson University College of Law, where occasionally I teach courses in the law school.
Okay, and are the courses you teach in the law school related to mental health issues?
Yes, historically I've co-taught 2 courses there. One's called Mental Health Law, which is the law, the interaction between the legal and the mental health systems. And the other course I've taught is, again, co-taught, is a course on legal aspects of aging and the law. Stetson University, one of their specialties is what they call elder law. And I teach in that program as well.
Okay. Do you conduct any training for other professionals?
Yes, part of my university responsibilities are to train mental health professionals on how they may contribute to the legal system, and specifically with respect to evaluating criminal defendants. I also do some related trainings in terms of evaluating kids who are involved in the juvenile justice system, other kinds of evaluations like guardianship and things like that. What they all have in common is I'm talking to healthcare professionals about how they can be of assistance to the legal system as it's trying to make decisions about individuals.
And in Florida, do professionals, psychologists, psychiatrists, have to be on a list in order to be able to be court appointed to conduct forensic evaluations?
Right. Florida. My understanding of Florida law is that in order to be appointed by, whenever possible, a judge who's appointing a mental health professional to do one of 2 kinds of evaluations: competence to stand trial, ability to understand and participate in the legal process, or sanity, how someone was thinking and feeling at and around the time of the offense. Whenever possible, judges are to appoint mental health professionals who've completed this state-approved training and curriculum.
And that's the state-approved training and curriculum that you teach?
I co-teach that. I've been co-teaching that for about 20 years now with a law professor, yes.
Okay. And do you have any special licenses or board certifications?
Yeah, I'm licensed to practice psychology in the state of Florida. I've been licensed since 1989, and I'm certified. I'm certified by the American Board of Clinical Psychology and the American Board of Forensic Psychology, so that's a professional certification, sort of what you call board certification. It might sound familiar to you as you think about whether you're physicians, board certified in pediatrics or obstetrics or cardiology or whatever. Thank you.
And how does one become board certified in forensic psychology?
You have to be licensed as a psychologist. You have to practice for 5 years. You have to submit to the board samples of your work as a forensic psychologist, and they review them, and if they find them acceptable, then you have to do an oral defense where they sort of quiz you about your work and about the area more generally, and that oral defense lasts for about 2 to 3 hours. And of course, in order to be eligible, you have to have requisite training in forensic mental health issues.
Okay, and you're board certified in both clinical and forensic psychology?
Clinical psychology and forensic psychology. I'm a clinical psychology by training. My specialty is forensic psychology.
All right. Could you tell us about your educational background?
Bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Rochester, graduated in '81. Master's and doctoral degrees, PhD, in clinical psychology from Florida State University. I earned them in '85 and '87, so I went right from Rochester to the Panhandle. In order to earn that degree, I had to do a 1-year internship, which I did at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston. And then when I was there, when I finished with that, I spent 2 years in Lincoln, Nebraska, where I was a fellow. I did a fellowship in the College of Law and the Department of Psychology, and I earned a master's degree in legal studies conferred by the law school. And that was my formal training, and then ever since that time I've been in Tampa.
And are you active in any professional organizations at this time?
I'm a member of the American Psychological Association. I'm a member of the American Academy of Forensic Psychology. I've held a number of positions and posts within both of those organizations.
And have you published any books or articles?
Yeah, I've co-edited 2 books on forensic psychology. One's about to be published. They're printing it as we speak. The other's been out for about a year. And then I've authored, currently I have 3 authored books, largely related to forensic psychology matters, interactions between the mental health and legal systems. And I have another book that's at the publishers right now, and it should be out in the spring. So 4 authored books and 2 edited books.
Okay. And you said that aside from teaching, you also kind of have a private practice?
Independent from the university, right.
Okay. And about how much time is spent in your independent practice?
I'm at the university full-time, and I conduct maybe 1 or 2, on average, 1 or 2 evaluations a week of someone whose psychological or psychiatric functioning is an issue or in dispute in some kind of legal proceeding, like a trial or something like that.
All right. And when you're conducting evaluations, I think you mentioned earlier you conduct 2 separate kinds of evaluations?
Well, I conduct a number of evaluations, not just 2.
No, I mean the different types. One is for competency and one is for sanity mainly?
I conduct those evaluations. I conduct other evaluations as well, but I would say 75% of the evaluations I conduct are either of a defendant's competence to stand trial, his ability to understand and participate in the legal process, or his mental state at the time of defense, his sanity.
Okay. And have you ever been qualified as an expert witness before?
Yes, I've testified in a number of legal proceedings and have been allowed to offer opinions.
Specifically in the field of forensic psychology?
Forensic psychology, clinical psychology, yes.
Do you know about how many times?
No, I do have a list, although I don't have it with me, of times I've offered sworn testimony, either in a deposition or a trial. I think it's fair to say, though, that I probably don't testify every other month, so probably less than 6 times a year, and I've been doing this for 20-some years, so somewhere between 100 and 200 times, I think, is a conservative, safe estimate.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, I would ask that Dr. Otto be recognized as an expert in the field of forensic psychology and be allowed to give his opinion as such.
What says the state?
No, we're not.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Dr. Otto will be accepted as an expert witness in the area of forensic psychology. You may continue.
Thank you. Dr. Otto, did you have an occasion to evaluate a man by the name of Jason Rodriguez?
I did.
And do you see Mr. Rodriguez in the courtroom?
I do.
And can you just tell us where he's at and what he's wearing?
He's next to one of his attorneys, and he's wearing a blue shirt and looking right at me at this point.
Okay. And that is the same gentleman that you did an evaluation with?
That is correct.
Okay. And you were hired by the defense, is that correct?
I was hired by your office.
And you are getting paid for your time?
I got paid for my work in this case, correct.
Okay. In order to evaluate and conduct and to write an evaluation?
Okay. Evaluate Mr. Rodriguez and write a report, right.
Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about the evaluation. When you spoke with Mr. Rodriguez, how much time did you spend with him?
I spent just about 2 3/4 hours, so less than 3 hours.
All right. And did you review any items before you spoke with Mr. Rodriguez?
I reviewed a number of documents before I spoke with him, and I reviewed a number of documents after I spoke with him.
Okay. Could you tell us what documents you reviewed?
I reviewed what I describe as the arrest report and supporting documentation. I reviewed what I describe as the indictment coming from the state. I reviewed printouts of what I would represent as email communications authored by the defendant. I reviewed a report summarizing a psychological evaluation completed by Dr. Olander. I reviewed records from Mr. Rodriguez's treatment at a practice called Greater Orlando Psychiatric Associates. I reviewed records of Mr. Rodriguez's treatment at Lakeside Behavioral Health Care. I reviewed records of his treatment at the Orange County Jail when he was incarcerated. I reviewed records from North Florida Evaluation and Treatment Center, where he had been held and treated. And I reviewed 2 competence evaluations completed by a psychiatrist by the name of Dr. Williams.
And is that from the North Florida Evaluation?
From North Florida Evaluation and Treatment Center. That's all the material I reviewed before I interviewed Mr. Rodriguez.
Okay. What about after you interviewed Mr. Rodriguez?
After I interviewed Mr. Rodriguez, I was provided with additional materials, and they include the statements of 5, what I'll describe as witnesses to the offenses. I reviewed a summary or a transcript of Mr. Rodriguez's statement to the police after his arrest. I reviewed a police report summarizing an incident in which Mr. Rodriguez was involved in at his a previous employer, and then I reviewed a transcript of Mr. Rodriguez's testimony at a prior hearing.
Okay. Did you also review any other psychologist or psychiatrist reports?
Yes. I was just going to get to that.
Do you know how many?
Well, I can give them to you here, and we can.
That would be great.
I reviewed a report summarizing an evaluation by Dr. Danziger. I reviewed a report summarizing an evaluation by Dr. Hall. I reviewed a report summarizing an evaluation conducted by Dr. Mings. I already mentioned Dr. Olander. I reviewed a report summarizing an evaluation conducted by Dr. Pritchard. And then I reviewed a report summarizing an evaluation conducted by Dr. Burns.
Okay. And aside from Dr. Olander, the other examiner reports, had you reviewed those before or after you wrote your report?
The other examiners, I reviewed Dr. Olander's report before I conducted the evaluation and wrote the report. I reviewed the other reports that I referenced after I evaluated Mr. Rodriguez and after I wrote the report summarizing my evaluation. One last thing, I also reviewed, you asked me materials I reviewed.
Yes.
I reviewed a website hosted by the National Institute of Mental Health.
Okay. And what was the purpose of that?
To get a good idea about how to talk about the disorder that I believe Mr. Rodriguez has in a way that is minimally full of jargon and mental health speak that would be maximally understandable by people who aren't mental health professionals.
Okay. So plain talk.
Sure.
Okay. Now, did you interview anyone regarding this case?
Yes.
Speak to anybody?
I spoke to you and I spoke to co-counsel about the case. I wouldn't describe that as interviews, but I also spoke with Mr. Rodriguez's mother in a telephone interview.
Okay.
By way of telephone.
Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about sanity. Based on your training experience, are you aware of what the legal definition is of sanity?
Yes, as a non-lawyer, yes.
Okay. Could you tell me what your understanding of the definition is?
Well, it varies from state to state, interestingly, but my understanding of how it works in Florida is the first thing you need is a mental disorder. In order to be eligible for the insanity defense, you need a mental disorder. I think the language in Florida law is something like mental disease.
I'm going to object to the doctor testifying to the law. He's not been qualified as an expert in that area.
May we approach?
You may.
Thank you. So,
Overruled. You can continue.
thank you. So the first part is that the person has to have some kind of mental disorder, mental disease, defect, infirmity, mental illness.
Right. What I was going to say is the language that mental health professionals typically use is mental disorder. The language in the law, if I can reference that, is mental disease, defect, or infirmity. It's just some differences in language that the law and mental health professions have, but I don't think it's very meaningful. So that's the first thing you need.
Okay, what's the second thing?
Second thing is, as a result of the mental disorder, the individual didn't know the nature and consequences of his actions. As a result of the mental disorder, the person didn't know the nature and consequences of his actions. Or, as a result of a mental disorder, the person didn't know the wrongfulness of his actions. So either or. If you have a mental disorder, and because of the mental disorder, you don't know the nature and consequences of your actions, or you don't know the wrongfulness of your actions, then my understanding is that gets you to insanity in the state of Florida.
Okay. So let's go back to number one. Did he have a mental infirmity, disease, or defect, disorder, illness?
At the time of the offenses?
Yes.
Yeah. Based on my interview of Mr. Rodriguez, interview of his mother, review of all the materials that I referenced, it's my opinion that at and around the time of the offenses, Mr. Rodriguez was experiencing symptoms of a mental disorder, what I'll call a severe and persistent mental illness.
And what is that mental illness?
The specific mental illness, in my opinion, is paranoid schizophrenia.
Okay. Could you please explain to us what paranoid schizophrenia is?
Okay. Best to start with schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a more severe mental disorder of all the mental disorders there are. It's estimated that about 1% of the population deals with this illness. It's characterized by significant symptoms that may include things like hallucinations, right? Hearing things or seeing things that aren't really there. They seem real to you if you have the illness, but they're not really there. Auditory hallucination, hearing something that's not there. Visual hallucination, seeing something that's not there. That's very characteristic of people with schizophrenia. Now, you can have other kinds of hallucinations, believe it or not, like tactile hallucinations. You feel like there's things on you or in your body when they're not. You can have what's called gustatory hallucinations. You actually taste, you think taste is in your mouth when it's really not. But the most common hallucinations are auditory and visual hallucinations.
Okay. And as far as the paranoid portion of the paranoid schizophrenia, how does that factor in?
Okay. Well, we're still not done with schizophrenia.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Hallucinations and hallucinations are common. Another common feature is delusions. What's a delusion? A fixed, false belief attributable to a mental disorder. Fixed. Doesn't go away. Fixed. False. It's false. It's wrong. It's incorrect belief that results from the mental illness. Common delusions are persecutory, right? You're being persecuted. We also call them paranoid. You believe people are conspiring to harm you. Another common delusion, common kind of delusion is grandiose, right? So you think you're special, you have special powers, you have special abilities.
Overrule at this point.
You have special powers, abilities, title, or privilege. So, for example, if someone, as a result of a mental illness, believes that he's the chief advisor to the president, or that he's going to be appointed the lieutenant governor by the governor, when there's no basis for that in reality, we might call that a grandiose delusion. That's second kind of symptoms, hallucinations, delusions. And we'll also talk about impaired thinking. Now, delusions are impaired thinking, but it's the content. It's what you're thinking, right? Impaired thought content. But there's another kind of impaired thinking. We'll call that impaired thought form. The form of your thinking, not what you're thinking, but how you're thinking. You're not thinking logically. You're not making sense. And oftentimes people with schizophrenia have impaired thought form. Their thinking is not sensical. It's not logical. It's not rational. This doesn't follow from that. And then finally, symptoms that we see often with people who are diagnosed as having schizophrenia are what we'll just call generally negative symptoms. And these are things they don't show, they don't experience, that people without the illness typically do. So, for example, they oftentimes show and experience very little emotion. Something bad can happen to them. Maybe their parents killed in an auto accident, and they don't experience or show a lot of emotion. They also oftentimes tend to withdraw from people. They isolate themselves. And they oftentimes almost, they can appear as if they're in a trance. They're kind of staring into space, and they're not very communicative verbally. So hallucinations, delusions, impaired thought form, and then what we'll call those negative symptoms, where you're not experiencing a lot of things that people typically experience. You're withdrawn and you're aloof.
Okay. And where does the paranoia part of that come in?
Well, my diagnosis is schizophrenia paranoid type, because in my opinion, Mr. Rodriguez, at and around the time of the offenses, had paranoid, persecutory beliefs. He believed that there was a conspiracy of many people working together to harm him and his family, that posed a risk and threat to him and his family.
Okay. Do typically people with schizophrenia share their conspiracies with everyone?
They may or they may not. If you're paranoid, it's quite possible that you won't share your conspiracies, theories, your beliefs about people conspiring against you, particularly with those that you believe may be conspiring against you. On the other hand, you may well confide your beliefs in those individuals who you trust, who you see as your allies, who aren't in on it, so to speak.
Okay. And I'd like to talk to you about some of the other symptoms that you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Do people with schizophrenia normally present with a flat affect, monotone voice?
They often do. They don't show a lot of emotion. Of course, they don't experience a lot of emotion. And one of the byproducts of different emotions and kind of being involved and engaged is sometimes you raise your voice, sometimes you lower your voice, etc. A complicating factor, of course, is that oftentimes, but not always, people with schizophrenia are on medication, and that medication itself can affect the emotions that people experience or display.
Oftentimes, because of the different symptoms, can this disease be mistaken for depression?
It can be, yes, it could be, but typically we try to typically we can distinguish that. There is an illness called schizoaffective disorder, which is some of the symptoms of schizophrenia, but along with that, symptoms of an affective illness. And in mental health speak, affect, let's just say, is shorthand for mood. So we do see some people with symptoms of schizophrenia, and along with that, an impaired mood, oftentimes depression. We might describe them as suffering from schizoaffective disorder or schizoaffective illness. Affect just being a synonym that mental health professionals use for mood. Some of that jargon that I talked about earlier.
Now, do people with schizophrenia look any different? Will you be able to tell they have schizophrenia by looking at them?
No, not simply based on their appearance, no.
So you talked about how you diagnosed at the time of the offense that Mr. Rodriguez had paranoid schizophrenia or was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, correct?
That's my opinion.
Okay. And in your review of the records and your interviews and talking with Mr. Rodriguez, what symptoms at the time of the offense, November 6th, 2009, was he experiencing?
In my opinion, Mr. Rodriguez was experiencing a number of symptoms that support or lead to my diagnosis. He was experiencing auditory hallucinations. He made reference to hearing a voice that no one else heard. And I believe that he heard that voice because of his illness. And that's the voice of someone he referred to as Sharp Tooth, who was communicating him, he believed, by way of radio waves that were getting to him as a result of some kind of device being implanted in him. So he was hearing the voices of an entity by the name of Sharptooth.
Your Honor, I'm going to object under 9704.
Approach. Objection overruled. You may continue.
Okay, so we were talking about what kind of symptoms Mr. Rodriguez was experiencing on or about November 6th of 2009. And
Right.
you said auditory.
Auditory hallucinations. He was hearing, he reported hearing the voice of this entity, Sharptooth, that was communicating to him by radio waves. He believed this was happening for a number of years as a result of an incident that occurred with a coworker, and it was saying threatening and derogatory things about him and his family. That's the auditory hallucination part. I believe that was there then. I also believe he was experiencing paranoid delusions prior to and at the time of the offenses. Those were significantly tied to the auditory hallucinations. That is, that Sharptooth and others, including people associated with his ex-employer and law enforcement officers, were conspiring to harm him, that there was a grand conspiracy to harass, stalk, surveil, and harm him. So that's the impaired thought content, what he was thinking. I believe that the form of his thinking was impaired as well. For example, it was reported by his mother that on the evening before, in the middle of the night, the day before the offense, hours before the offenses, Mr.
Sustained at this point. He's going a little too far afield.
Okay. Without telling us as much as possible what other people told you, I know you need to rely on some of that in making your opinion. What other types of symptoms you said his form of thinking was impaired?
Yes, his thinking was not coherent and organized, and he wasn't thinking rationally.
Okay. Any other symptoms?
auditory hallucinations, impaired thought content, impaired thought form. No, they were the symptoms that I concluded he was experiencing as a result of a number of things he told me, other people told me, and I saw referenced in the records.
Okay. Now, you said you referenced some records. Were those previous medical records?
That was some of the records that led me to this conclusion. Yes, not all of the records, though.
And based on reviewing previous records, was there any type of history of mental illness with Mr. Rodriguez?
There was.
And do you remember the date when it started either being recorded by professionals or?
Well, apparently, I think this is very isolated and not directly relevant to this issue, but,
Object, Your Honor.
Sustained.
okay, well,
To your knowledge, when was it first reported to professionals, recorded in a medical record, that he had a mental illness?
in 2003 by staff at a practice located here in Orlando.
Okay. And did you review any other records from 2003 to 2009 that evidenced some kind of ongoing mental illness?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I wanted to go back to the sanity test. We talked about, number one, they have to have the mental infirmity, disease, or defect, paranoid schizophrenia. I want to go to number two. That because of his condition, either A, he did not know what he was doing or its consequences. What do you think that he knew what he was doing or its consequences?
I don't, I'm of the opinion that I do not believe that Mr. Rodriguez understood that he was shooting a number of people who posed no threat to him whatsoever. I believe Mr. Rodriguez believed that when he did that, he was shooting people who were involved in a conspiracy that posed a threat of harm to him and his family. So in that way, I don't believe he knew what he was doing, as far as he didn't know he was shooting what ended up being very innocent people who had no responsibility for any of the things he thought they were having responsibility for.
Okay. And the second part of that is, or B, although he knew what he was doing and its consequences, he did not know it was wrong. What are your thoughts on that second prong?
My opinion is that Mr. Rodriguez believed that it was right, that it was okay. He had taken many, many steps to solve his problems, to respond to the threats that were terribly real to him. Sent emails and other messages to agencies seeking their assistance and help, complaining of what was happening to him and the threat that he and his family endured with no success. And then finally ended up doing what he thought was necessary, which was shooting people who he believed, mistakenly, as a result of his mental illness, posed a real threat to him and his family.
Okay. So, as far as the second portion goes, the second test,
Second prong.
second prong, it's your opinion that he didn't know what he was doing was wrong.
Correct.
All right. So, in your professional opinion, you believe that Mr. Rodriguez does meet the criteria for insanity.
I would ultimately leave that for the jury to decide. That's their job. But I see, as I understand Mr. Rodriguez and his case and his circumstance, I understand the facts to support an adjudication or a finding of insanity. Yes.
Okay. Now, as far as, I want to talk about the second prong of insanity a little bit further. How can you get up 4 years later and tell us that he didn't know it was wrong?
Well, that opinion is partly based on my understanding of how he was thinking and feeling at and around the time of the offenses, and that's based on what he told me, and that's based on what other people told me, and that's based on what other mental health professionals learned as well. So you're asking me, how can I form opinion about how he was thinking in 2009? It's based on various recollections or reports of how he was thinking, acting, and feeling in 2009. Not only from Mr. Rodriguez, but his mother, what he told other mental health professionals, documents I saw that he authored, etc.
Okay. And
I'm sorry, and as well as statements of some of his coworkers too.
And as a doctor doing these evaluations, is it common for you to be asked much farther in time, past the time of the actual event, to make an opinion like this?
Well, any time a mental health professional offers an opinion about someone's sanity or offers testimony relevant to that, it's always after the fact. Sometimes it's 2 years, sometimes it's 6 months. 4 years is a long time, but it's certainly not the longest that anyone's ever been asked to address that issue with.
Okay. And when we're talking about sanity, we're only talking about, in this case, November 6th of 2009, when the shooting happened.
Correct.
Okay. If I could just have a moment, please.
You may.
Thank you. When you tell us that it's your opinion that Mr. Rodriguez did not know what he was doing was wrong, why do you give us that opinion? Based on what?
Based on two things, I think primarily. One is what I see as well-documented paranoid beliefs that a number of people were conspiring against him, including people in the workplace. He believed that people in the workplace were responsible for what had been implanted in his head and the threatening messages he was getting. He believed that people in the workplace were responsible for him being surveilled and followed and stalked, which of course in reality he was not. He had made numerous attempts to contact governmental agencies, the FBI and the FCC, complaining about the harassment, the risk he was at.
You may.
Okay, without telling me,
Objection sustained.
sorry, without telling me exactly which documents or the content of the documents you're talking about, could you continue?
Without telling you the content of the documents?
Yes.
Okay, I'll try. I don't want to say what I'm not supposed to say. Mr. Rodriguez reported to me that he made numerous efforts to take care of the harassment, surveillance, stalking, and threats that he was experiencing. And someone else I interviewed offered information consistent with that.
Okay. So you're saying that based on these delusions, hallucinations he was having, that when he went into the Gateway Center and started shooting, it was wrong because this mental illness was active and he didn't understand that that was wrong?
He didn't understand it to be wrong because of the beliefs he held and the things he was experiencing, the hallucinations, that in reality there was no basis for in reality.
Okay. Now, can someone know that it's wrong to point a gun at someone and still have this be wrong, not know that it's wrong to shoot people?
In my opinion, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Why?
Well, it's not always wrong to shoot someone. If you have a belief that they're posing a threat and harm to you, and it's imminent, my understanding is you may be able to act in self-defense. So understanding what someone does really takes an appreciation of how they're thinking, particularly when their thinking is affected by a severe and persistent mental illness like schizophrenia, such that you believe there's a grand conspiracy against you, and you believe that you're getting regular communications from an entity that doesn't exist, that's threatening you and your family and saying derogatory and terrible things about you and your family as well.
And with paranoid schizophrenia, is this something where people are, it might get worse, it might get better, you'll see changes, or is it the same severe all the time?
People with schizophrenia can get worse and get better. Unfortunately, many people don't get better. There's a general discussion about a rule of thirds, that a third of people show a significant decline, a third of the individuals who have the diagnosis show kind of this steady problematic adjustment, and then a third of the individuals can make a good recovery once it's diagnosed. So that means a lot of people with schizophrenia don't do so well. They can get worse. Some can get worse, some can get better, though. Yeah. So the symptoms can wax and wane, particularly with effective treatment. You would expect the symptoms to wane, or with high levels of stress or drugs that you might be using, you might expect the symptoms to wax, to get worse.
Now, does the fact that there was no disguise, no hat, no mask,
Object to leaving.
Let her finish asking the question. Doctor, don't answer the question until I tell you to finish your question.
do those facts weigh in at all with the didn't know what he was doing was wrong?
Any objections to the question is completed.
Objection to her already completed leading question.
Overruled. You may answer, Doctor.
We talk a lot about this. Mental health professionals talk a lot about this issue when we're talking about assessing someone's sanity, their mental state at the time of the offenses. And my thinking is this, is if someone does wear a mask and a disguise,
Your Honor, I'm going to object to his opinion based on something other than his professional expertise. His opinion on the facts is irrelevant. If he's coming to a conclusion based on his expertise, that's one thing, but now he's just offering lay opinion.
Well, objection overruled at this point, you can make that discernment on cross-examination.
I and many other mental health professionals
Object to the many other mental health
Sustained,
professionals.
doctor, you can't give us your opinion. You can't talk about what other folks
Okay.
think.
when I lecture about this to other mental health professionals, what I say is the presence of a disguise or engaging in obvious behaviors that suggest knowledge of wrongfulness. For an example, wearing a disguise, trying to avoid apprehension, saying you'll never catch me, I love breaking the law. That suggests knowledge of wrongfulness. However, the absence of those behaviors doesn't necessarily mean that someone didn't know the wrongfulness, but it could. So that's my response.
It's a factor
Yeah,
to be considered.
yeah, but it's not dispositive.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Dr. Otto. You saw Mr. Rodriguez exactly when? September 24th?
Right.
Okay, about 6 weeks ago?
Yes.
Okay. And as you've already discussed on direct, that's nearly 4 years after the offense.
Right, November of 2009. Mhm.
You also talked about the fact that in evaluating the legal factors for insanity, you, many months down the line, are trying to assess how the person who committed an act was thinking at the time of the offense, how they were feeling, and how they were acting.
Correct.
And you do that based on your evaluation of various sources, as you've described.
Right, data sources, sure.
I'm sorry?
Data sources.
Data
right, yeah,
sources.
information sources. Yeah.
All right. You indicated on direct that you had information from the law enforcement agency.
Yes.
Okay. Tell me then who Maureen Daly is.
I don't know.
Who is Ed Severino?
Don't know him.
Who is Guy Luginbill?
He, I believe, is one of the victims in the
Okay.
case.
Who is Elizabeth Bartell?
Don't know who that is.
Who is Keith Brockman?
He was one of the witnesses in the case and may have been a victim too.
Okay. Who is Jeffrey Glenn?
Don't know who that is.
Who is Farrell Hickson?
I believe he was a victim and therefore a witness.
Okay. Who is Nicole Crawford?
Don't know who that is.
Who is Renato Gonzalez?
Don't know who that is.
Who is Kenneth Van Velzen?
I believe he is an employee. He was an employee at the scene of the incident. He worked at the facility.
All right. Who is James Pearson?
I don't think I know who that is.
Who is Lori Ross?
Lori Ross.
Lori Ross. R-O-S-S.
I don't think I know who that is.
Okay. What does the surveillance video of Mr. Rodriguez at the Gateway Center show?
My recollection is all I saw was him. I thought it was him leaving the scene. That's all I remember seeing.
You watched a video?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. You must have watched that since your deposition, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So this is something that you have done after you and I spoke about this case 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Overruled.
Correct.
Okay. But your recollection is that you only saw him leaving the building?
In terms of me recognizing who I thought was Mr. Rodriguez, yes.
Okay. Did you attempt to clarify where Mr. Rodriguez may appear on different points in whatever video was provided to you after we spoke?
No.
Did you know that how Mr. Rodriguez got to the building?
He said he drove.
Where did he park?
I saw information indicating that he did not park in the garage because he couldn't get access, so he parked on the street.
Okay. And where did he go from there?
Well, I know he eventually ended up in the offices. Where he went from there, I don't know anything beyond that.
How did he get into the building?
I don't know that.
If he spent 6.5 minutes in a parking garage, what was he doing there?
I don't know what he was doing.
Did you ask him?
No.
Did you even know that before going up to the offices of Reynolds, Smith, and Hill and shooting the place up, that he spent 6.5 minutes in the parking garage?
No.
How long was he in the offices?
I don't know.
Did you ask him?
Yes, he reported not knowing how long he was there.
Actually, he reports no memory of what happened in the offices, correct?
Well, no, I don't think that's exactly correct.
Limited memory?
To me, limited memory, yes.
All right, so what he does remember is that when he got up that morning, he went to Anna Maria University.
That's what he said.
Okay. And he remembers that he carried a gun.
That's what he said. He had a gun with him, yes.
Okay. Well, we're talking about what he was thinking, how he was acting, and perhaps what he was feeling on November 6th of 2009, correct?
Correct.
All right. So this is part of how he was acting. He got up, he went to a university in an attempt to register.
Oh, I'm not
Correct?
disagreeing. I'm just suggesting that my knowledge of that is based on what he told me. Right. That's what he told me. Yes.
All right. Have you had an opportunity, or did you know that there was a video of him at Anna Maria University?
No, I wasn't provided with a video of him at the university.
Okay. Did you know that he went to the post office?
That's what he told me.
Did you know that he took a gun to these locations?
Objection, that's not evidence.
Overruled.
My understanding was that he had a gun on him the whole morning,
All right.
including when he was making these other stops.
Did you learn through any source that Mr. Rodriguez deliberately left his gun in the car when he went to Anna Maria University because he knew it would be wrong to take a gun on campus?
Yes.
You learned that from some source.
That's what was reported in a source I reviewed, yes.
All right. And did you learn that Mr. Rodriguez deliberately left the gun in the car when he went into the post office because he believed it would be wrong or illegal to take a gun into a federal building?
A document I reviewed indicated that as well, so I was aware of that.
What time did he go over to the scene of the shooting?
My memory was that it was about 11.
Okay. Did he go directly after having been at the post office?
I'm not aware of him making any other stops, and I don't know what time he was at the post office.
Did he tell you?
He didn't tell me he made it. He said he went to the school, he went to the post office, and then he went to the office.
Okay. Did he give you some details about when he was at the post office? What time of day?
No, other than it was after the school.
And his purpose for going to the post office was to determine whether or not he had an unemployment check there, correct?
That's what he said.
And that when the unemployment check wasn't there, he became angry.
I don't know if he told me he was angry, but I know that he told me that he wanted a check. He was hoping a check would be there. I don't know if he told me he was angry.
All right. Did he tell you that enough is enough, that these people are going to start paying his unemployment?
I don't think he said that either, no.
Did you learn from some other source that he had made that statement?
No. Well, if I reviewed that, I have no memory for that statement, no.
But he told you as soon as he realized at the post office that he didn't have this unemployment check, that he wanted to go over to Reynolds, Smith, and Hill to find out why they were finagling with the numbers.
Playing with the numbers, cooking the numbers, something like that, correct. He also told me more, but he did say that.
And that he wanted to talk to, I believe you've referenced this person in your report as the big boss.
Did I? I don't know if it's, I referenced, he referenced someone by name in his interview with me. I don't know if he used the words the big boss, and that doesn't sound familiar to me.
Okay. Are you referencing Mr. Avitable?
Yes.
Okay. So that's who you wanted to go talk to about the issue with the numbers with the unemployment check.
Yeah, with respect to the, yes.
All right. So earlier in your testimony, you talked about Mr. Rodriguez going over to Reynolds, Smith, and Hill because he was in fear for his life or his family's life and had to go take care of the problem.
I don't think I said that, but.
You said that was the delusional system that he was under.
Yes, but I don't think I said he told me he had to go over to RS&H to take care of the problem.
Okay, so you interpreted, based on what he said about his delusions, that he had this life-threatening situation involving RS&H.
Some people at RS&H, not everyone there.
Did it include Mr. Avitable?
I don't remember. He did not specifically mention Mr. Avitable as someone who was conspiring to hurt him and his family or threatening him and his family.
Okay. But he did use the name Rafael Velasquez.
He did.
As being part of the conspiracy.
Correct.
Do you know where Rafael Velasquez was on November 6th of 2009?
I believe he was in the building.
Where?
That I don't know.
Did you know that he was under his desk?
Objection, facts not evidence.
Overruled as to that question.
Yes, now I remember that.
Okay. So he was there, correct?
Right, that's my understanding.
He was not only in the building, he was in the offices.
Right, that were where the shooting occurred, correct.
And had stayed in the office during the shooting.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Yet didn't get shot.
I don't believe he was a shooting victim, no.
You talked about Mr. Rodriguez not understanding what he was doing.
In my opinion, yes.
Okay. Well, you know he was a hunter, correct? He was a duck hunter.
He said he had a gun for hunting, yes, a long gun.
And that he had a weapons permit.
I knew
so
that
he
too.
could carry a concealed weapon.
I knew that too.
Are you telling us he didn't know what happens if you fire a gun?
I'm not saying, no, that's not my opinion.
All right. So as far as him knowing what he is doing, do you believe that if Mr. Rodriguez had a gun, had a round chambered, and pulled the trigger, that he would know that that action is likely to seriously injure or kill someone?
I have that opinion, yes.
That he did know that?
Yes.
Right. In fact, what he told you was he was carrying a gun for self-protection, correct?
That's what he said.
Meaning that if he needed to protect himself, he would chamber around, pull the trigger, and defend himself.
Yes.
Right.
I inferred that from what he said.
Right. So that first prong that you were discussing, that he didn't know what he was doing, he certainly knew that firing at people, that he was firing at people.
I'm of that opinion. I don't believe he believed he was firing a water pistol or had a pop gun or anything like that. Right.
All right. In fact, he told you he shot at a whole bunch of people.
That's what he said. He said he had a limited memory for what occurred, but he did say he shot at people, yes.
In fact, he told you he was aiming for people and he knew he hit a whole bunch.
He told me he was aiming people. I don't know if he told me that he hit a whole bunch.
May I approach the witness? I'm going to show you page 10 of your deposition. Do you remember giving your deposition?
Yes.
On October 28th of 2013?
Yes.
Let me take a look at the highlighted portion. Do you recall that as a question and answer that we engaged in 10 days ago?
I mean, I remember the deposition. I don't remember saying that.
Okay. Do you want to review it and tell me if that refreshes your recollection?
Of whether I said it? It doesn't refresh my recollection of whether I said it or not. I have no doubts that it was accurately recorded.
Did you tell me that Mr. Rodriguez said he knew he hit a whole bunch of people?
I have no doubt that that accurately reflects what I said. So as a result of that, my answer is yes. But I have no independent memory for saying that.
All right. Do you have notes that support
That's what I'm
that
looking.
he told you that?
That's what I'm looking for now.
All right. Do you need a moment?
I wrote in my notes two things. I have language in my notes about him wanting to see the big boss, which references something you said earlier. I don't know if it was in my report. I don't remember. But I have here in my notes that he told me that he was aiming for people and hit a whole bunch of people. So I'm confident that he told me that. I have no reason to doubt that I said that to you. I just have no memory, independent memory of that.
Got it. All right. So he knew what he was doing
He knew he was shooting people, yes.
and hitting them. He hit a whole bunch of people. Did he say that to you?
Yes, when I interviewed him 6 weeks ago, he said he was aiming for a whole bunch of people, right.
Did you ask him why?
Why he
Was shooting those people.
He said, whenever I asked him about why he was shooting or what the basis was for, he said he didn't know. He didn't say it was because I didn't get my unemployment check. He didn't say because there was a grand conspiracy against me. He said, it's a blur. I don't have a complete memory. I only remember some of it.
So your testimony earlier that he was thinking that there was a grand conspiracy and this was something that he had to do was not supported by his statement to you, correct?
Well, I think he said something to me that supports that. We haven't talked about that, but I think he did say something to me that supports that.
What was that?
And that was that there were two reasons to go to his former place of employment. One was to see why they were cooking the numbers so he could finally get his employment benefits, and the other was to talk to Mr. Velasquez about the voices that he was hearing and the transmissions.
The brain hacking.
Correct, brain hacking.
All right. Did he do that?
My understanding is he did not talk to Mr. Velasquez, no.
All right. Did he even see him?
I don't believe Mr. Velasquez reported that he saw the defendant.
Did you ask the defendant if he even knew if Mr. Velasquez was there?
He assumed he was there. Did he know he was? He went there to see him. He had the assumption Mr. Velasquez was there. Did he know he was there? I don't know if he said that or not.
Did he ask for him?
I don't believe he said anything when he was there.
All right.
So that would be no.
And did he take a direct path to Mr. Velasquez's office to your knowledge, when he went there?
No.
Where'd he go?
I don't know. But I did read Mr. Velasquez's statement that there was no interaction between him and the defendant, so I know he didn't go there.
All right. So, assuming that Mr. Rodriguez's delusions, as you've described them, were true, that there was a conspiracy against him that was stalking him, is it your opinion that he was acting in self-defense when he went over to RSNH?
I think in his...
shot people who were not part of the conspiracy?
I think in his mind, yes. I think his thinking was confused and impaired by his mental disorder, and that's an evidence of impaired thought form and poor logic flowing from the illness of schizophrenia, yes.
But he didn't tell you that. He told you he didn't know why he started shooting.
Correct.
He didn't tell you that there was a threat present at that moment when he started shooting those people.
He told me there was an omnipotent, omnipresent threat. He was threatened all the time,
So he had a
wherever
license.
and whenever.
So because of that, you're saying he then had a license to kill anybody who he thought...
Speculation, not relevant, hypothetical.
Overruled.
He had the license to kill anybody who he thought was involved in a conspiracy because they were stalking him or threatening him or harassing him.
I don't know how to respond to your question about license to kill. No one issues licenses to kill. You cannot buy, purchase, or earn a license to kill. So I don't understand what you mean by that language. I will tell you that it's my opinion that Mr. Rodriguez was experiencing symptoms of significant paranoia, that he believed there was an all-encompassing, constant, imminent threat to him and his family, and that explains his actions.
From whom?
From some individuals in the workplace, including Mr. Velasquez, including him, Sharptooth, select law enforcement officers.
Select? Meaning the entire Orlando Police Department?
No, I said select. That wouldn't
Okay.
be. That means some, right? Select law enforcement officers, including some who frequented his prior place of employment.
Who would that be?
By name? Oh, he didn't. He did not name them.
So who or what constituted the threat that he had to defend himself against?
An imaginary character by the name of Sharptooth.
Was Sharptooth at RSNH that day?
That's not what Mr. Well, of course, Sharptooth's not a person, right? It's an entity.
Tell you that he saw Sharptooth at RSNH that day.
No, Mr. Rodriguez never told me that he ever saw Sharptooth. He never saw him.
Okay, that's what he told you.
Yes.
Did you find out from any other source that he said he saw Sharptooth?
No.
Okay. What overt act was committed by any member of the conspiracy, according to Mr. Rodriguez, that would justify shooting in self-defense?
Nothing. That's the
Objection relevant.
You may. You may continue.
Thank you. Dr. Otto, you testified on direct that Mr. Rodriguez was shooting people involved in the threat against him, that he believed were involved in the threat against him, correct?
I don't remember if I said that, but I don't dispute your characterization of or representation of what I said.
All right. Of the people he shot, what overt act did any of them commit that would have justified him in shooting them?
You mean an opinion about legally justified? An
Did
opinion
he-
on the law of self-defense? Or
Either that, or did he tell you that he had a delusion or a hallucination of some sort that they had done something specifically that would justify him shooting them?
what Mr. Rodriguez told me was that there were many people in the workplace who were conspiring against him and responsible for all the experiences that I've talked about earlier. He identified one of them by name and did not identify all of them by name.
Did you ask?
Did I ask if he could give me the names of other people in the workplace? No.
All right. Did he
And-
mention Otis Beckford as having been involved in a conspiracy to harm or threaten him?
I know he did not mention Mr. Beckford.
How about Mr. Luginbill?
He did not mention, in fact, the only people I can think of him mentioning from the workplace are Mr. Avidable and Mr. Velasquez by name. But my response was that he had a false belief that a number of people in the workplace, including at least Mr. Velasquez, were conspiring to harass, surveil, stalk, and harm him. And that he was always at risk, he and his family were always at risk for harm. I think
What kind of harm?
physical harm.
What kind of physical harm?
Being shot, for example.
Did he actually say that his delusion was that he was going to be shot by somebody at RSNH?
Not at RSNH, but that he would be harmed, that he would be tortured, yes.
Tortured?
Yes.
All right. So in response to this delusion, what he does is he goes there where he says the harm exists, right?
There's a threat, right? He goes to where the threat is.
Right. And once he goes there, he doesn't, to you, identify that there was another specific threat, either real or imagined, at that place that justified him taking action to defend his life.
Right. He didn't say, I thought Mr. Beckford had a gun. I thought someone else was going to jump across the desk and strangle me. He didn't say anything like that. Right.
I don't have any other questions of the witness. Thank you, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Dr. Otto, is it as simple as Mr. Rodriguez knew not to bring a gun into a post office, so he knew what he was doing that day?
If you're not mentally ill, it is.
Okay.
The problem is when you're mentally ill and your thinking is confused and you're thinking illogically, you act in ways that don't make sense. That is what makes this all the more complicated.
Okay. So if he knows that he can't bring a gun into a post office because it's a federal building, and he knows he can't bring a gun into a school, how does he not know that it's wrong to go in and shoot a bunch of people?
Because they're not a bunch of people in Mr. Rodriguez. In my opinion, they're not a bunch of people in Mr. Rodriguez's world. They're part of this grand conspiracy that pose an imminent threat to him and his family. Now, Well, what kind of sense does it make to go somewhere where you know there's a bunch of people who pose an imminent threat, and one of those individuals actually puts something in your brain that communicates voices that threaten you? That doesn't make any sense, does it? Of course it doesn't. That's the whole nature of the mental disorder, and the challenge and the illogical thinking that doesn't make sense. Mr. Rod, sometimes law enforcement officers would come into Subway to...
Overrule at this point.
Mr. Rodriguez worked at a sandwich shop, Subway restaurants. Law enforcement officers would come in there to order sandwiches. He said they put their hands on their weapons. He interpreted that as an attempt to threaten and intimidate him. Now, how much sense does that make? How many people in society have been around a law enforcement officer when he might have put his hand on his weapon? And who thinks the officer has it in for me? That's illogical. That makes no sense. Well, that's the problem when you try to fully understand the logic of someone who's experiencing a mental illness similar to the mental illness that Mr. Rodriguez is and was experiencing.
So is it also as simple as if Mr. Rodriguez knows that if he points a gun at somebody and fires the weapon, that person could get hurt, shot, or die? Is it as simple as if he knows that, then how could he know it was wrong to go do that on November 6th of 2009?
In my opinion, no. Why are you shooting? Who are you shooting? What's the circumstance? It's not as simple as what the person did and what occurred. It's much more complicated than that.
Okay. Now, when he told you that he was going to go talk to a big boss, you took that to mean Mr. Evitable. Is that correct?
Correct.
Did he say that he took any steps to find out if Mr. Evitable was even there that day?
He did not.
He said, though, he was going to go talk to him about the money?
He wanted to see why they were playing with the numbers, and as a result, he wasn't getting his unemployment, or at least that was his inference as to why an unemployment check was not being delivered.
Okay. In forming your opinion, would it be helpful to talk to people who did not know Mr. Rodriguez at all?
Maybe if they observed his behavior or heard what he said at and around the time of the offense, they might not know him. But I mean, imagine you had a witness who said, Mr. Rodriguez said, well, obviously you didn't have to know Mr. Rodriguez to provide helpful information about him potentially.
This overt act that was mentioned about self-defense, going there to a threat. In relating that to the criteria for insanity, if he doesn't know what he's doing is wrong, does it require an overt act? Like if somebody, does it require that somebody point a gun at him or threaten him in some way or move towards him or swing at him in order for him to react?
No, I'm going to object. She's asking him for a legal conclusion.
Sustain, rephrase your question.
If Otis Beckford had turned around and swung at Mr. Rodriguez that day, would your opinion be any different as far as whether he knew right from wrong what he was doing?
No.
Thank you.
Any recross?
Just very briefly. Dr. Otto, people who are paranoid schizophrenic are capable of basic human emotion as well, correct?
Yes.
Love,
Yes.
hate,
Yes.
anger,
Yes.
are basic human emotions,
Of course.
independent of your schizophrenia.
Sure.
For example, Mr. Rodriguez said to you that he was angry because RSNH was messing, finagling, whatever word, with the numbers. And so in response to that, he wanted to go see what was up.
Again, I think you asked that before, and I said I don't remember him saying that he was angry about it, but that he certainly wanted to get it addressed. I'm not saying that he didn't say he was angry, but I just have no memory for him specifically saying he was angry. I do have a memory for him specifically saying the reason he went to his former employer was to figure out and address this issue of them playing with the numbers, or language to that effect.
All right. In your redirect, you mentioned Subway, or
Yes.
place of employment, where Mr. Rodriguez saw police officers come in and he thought they were talking about him or that there was some threat associated with their presence because they would put their hand on their gun.
Correct.
All right. You also testified that select police agencies or officers were part of this conspiracy.
Correct. That's what he reported, yes. That's what he believed.
So the police also posed a threat to Mr. Rodriguez.
At least some did, yes.
Was he able to identify who?
He did not identify specific agencies or officers, no.
All right. He didn't tell you that the Orlando Police Department, as an agency, was part of the conspiracy and posed a threat.
He did not say that.
All right. If Mr. Rodriguez felt a threat from law enforcement when they came to get him, why didn't he shoot them?
Yeah, I know that happened, that it was really an uneventful surrender. There's a few reasons I thought about this. One is that because those particular officers didn't pose a threat, in his opinion.
Did he tell you that?
No. He didn't report that they did pose a threat, nor did he report that they did not pose a threat.
Did you even ask him about it?
Let me see what I asked him specifically about that. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, what I have here is he said that he wasn't worried about the police being there because he didn't think at that time he had done anything wrong.
All right, but he didn't mention in that instance that the police posed a threat to him.
He did not say that. That's right.
Do you believe he knew that if he shot at those police officers that would be wrong?
Presuming he didn't see them as a threat, yes.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Any additional questions, Ms. Vickers?
No, Your Honor.
May the doctor be excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Dr. Otto.
Thank you, Judge.
May be excused, sir.
Oh, thanks. I'll take it. No problem.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're going to take a 10-minute recess to a quarter past the hour. I'm going to ask you not to discuss this case among yourselves nor with anyone else. Any additional instructions from the state or the defense?
No,
No,
no.
Your Honor.
Okay, take a 10-minute recess.
Jury excellence.
think we'll be in recess. May the attorneys approach the bench. I don't need this on the record.